Hello and welcome everybody to episode 39 of Kerbal Space Endeavour. We are here around Laythe with our Laythe Satcom mission and we're going in for an aerobraking. Now this is the beginning of the episode. I know most of you are still listening, thankfully. Why this episode is a little bit weird is I am sick. I have a fever and I have a cold. And yeah, therefore my voice is a little bit weird. I hope you guys can live with it. If not, well, you can just skip the episode or mute it and just see what's happening. But let's continue on to the episode itself. We're going in for an aerobraking and yeah, things don't always go to plan as I wish them to be. So we're coming in quite fast for an aerobraking, but I do have an inflatable heat shield at the bottom of the craft that should cover it entirely. I've tested it before, but you know, testing something around Kerbin is a big difference than actually testing it in practice around the planetary body that we wish. But from this point of view, it pretty much looks like it's going to cover the entire craft. But yeah, I already said so, something's going wrong. And as you can see in the top left corner of the screen, I just lost connection to the base back home on Kerbal, and therefore I have no more control over the craft. So, SAS is not working, and somehow the heat shielding, the inflatable, is not my friend. It really isn't. Somehow it has such a high drag, or it just wants to move the entire craft out of balance for some reason, or just flip it around. It doesn't matter where you put the center of mass, even if it is very, very low and close to the heat shield itself, it still tends to wobble around. And as you can see, we're flaming up in the atmosphere. We're at 30 kilometers, but from the point of view, it looks like nothing has broken off so far. Everything seems to be in order. I mean, we do have some heat warnings there on the left side on the little small engines that we have for our probe that is going to land on the surface later. But we'll get to that later. As you can see, we survived the first aerobraking more or less, but yeah. We're just gonna go jump ahead. I'm not gonna show all of the sequences and all of the maneuvering I did because there's quite a few that I had to do. And as you can see, most of them I had no connection, so then I had to redo the entire maneuver and use a lot more fuel than I wanted in the first place. But eventually I got where I wanted to be, and as you can see me messing around, we're going in for another aerobraking around Laythe. And maybe this time around will be a lot more stable. All of this is of course shown in 4 times post-editing time acceleration, just because this craft has so many parts on it, it lags the hell out of my computer. But yeah, just so you guys know. Okay, moving on to the re-entry. As you can see, this time around we actually do have a connection back to base, and therefore we're not spinning out of control and we're not losing things. And it seems like I left one of the satellite dishes open and it made the craft a little bit more unstable, but hey, well, second time's the charm, as it seems. So this time we're done with the aerobraking, but we're still too fast and on an escape trajectory, so we have to use the engines to slow ourselves down. However, once we're done with that and we are in a orbit, a stable orbit, I am detaching the Surveyor 1 and Surveyor 2, and as it seems like the Surveyor 1 has taken some re-entry damage. We've lost one of our solar sails, which is going to be quite annoying because now I can't run the ion engines at full power. So yeah, here I'm just getting away from the craft with the Surveyor 1 and Surveyor 2 because I want them to go into a high orbit, and once I'm in a high orbit I want to change the inclination so we get into a polar orbit. But it is a lot less fuel consuming if you change your inclination while you're in a high orbit than it is when you're in a low orbit. And of course we're going to detach the Surveyor number 2 here, and It looks like this one hasn't taken any damage. No, both solar sails are here, and therefore we'll be able to run it at maximum efficiency and maximum power. And can we? First we gotta rename it. There we go. And of course full power, and we do not lose any electricity. Yes! I like it. So yeah, just moving them away in different orbits, so I don't have to maneuver both of them at the same time. And yeah, so these things will go once we reach the other side. As I said, I'm skipping a lot of the mundane maneuvering that you guys know that I can do, because you've seen me do the Eve mission, Eve Satcom mission, and the Duna Satcom mission. And well, I just want to get a little bit ahead and not just re-show the same things over and over and over again, just on slightly different planets. Now, one of the things that I encountered, once again, which I haven't in a long time, is the duplication bug that sometimes tends to happen, where the same craft seems to spawn in the same location, and then of course it explodes, implodes, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I had to reload. In the end though, I got the craft down into a 1,000 kilometer orbit, where now I am renaming the craft, so I have pretty much an idea when I try to link satellites together, even though it won't be really necessary because I have omnidirectional antennas on here. And what the hell was wrong with me right there? Kind of not even capable of getting this craft away without bouncing and scraping off the other craft. Okay, so these are the satcoms that are going to be stationed in a, well, it's not a geosynchronous orbit, but they're going to be 4 satellites around Laythe with the same orbital speed or orbital time, orbital period, let's call it orbital period. And therefore we have connection all over Laythe at any given time if we need be. These satellites then should connect to the main Satcom over Jool, but Joolian Satcom is still about a year away, so we're gonna have to make do with what we have. And the problem that I have right here is that this entire craft is the main connection right now, but I didn't put any omnidirectional satellites on this craft right here. So I have a little bit of trouble, and I can't deploy my smaller omnidirectional antennas. And yeah, we'll have to wait until we can do something else about that later. But let's continue on to the next craft, which is on a trajectory towards Laythe, and that is the station, well, the Laythe station, for which I do not have a name yet, so if you guys can come up with a name, I'd appreciate it. And I'll just pick the one that you guys, well, the one I like the most. However, one of the mistakes I made when putting this into an orbit, I put it in the wrong way, because I want the station to go with the rotation of the planet. I don't want the station to fly against the rotation of the planet. I mean, it shouldn't matter too much, but I guess I'm just a little bit of a perfectionist that way. And yeah, so in a very, very high orbit, I then use the excessive amount of fuel that we have to turn the craft around, or actually just switch our orbit. I also fix our inclination a little bit so it looks a lot nicer. And then I'm going in for a parking orbit of around 500 kilometers, just like Shangri-La is back on Kerbal. So there we go. Okay, we have a station in orbit, and we still have quite the excessive amount of fuel on board, which is actually rather surprising. Okay, next thing that is coming up is our base. As you know, there are 2 Kerbals on board, which, or whose names I have forgotten at the moment. I apologize. I will remember the next time around, or when it actually starts to matter. Okay, so we're going in for Laythe, but as you can see, we're coming in actually a little bit fast right here. 5,000 meters per second is about 3,000 or 3,500 meters per second too much. And yeah, most definitely there is not enough atmosphere, or I couldn't dig too deep into the atmosphere without being afraid of burning up to slow ourselves down to get into a stable orbit. So we just use it as an aero braking. And of course, we then have to move on and use Jool to slow ourselves down even further. Now, for those of you who have watched my Mission to Jool series, which was the first videos I actually uploaded to YouTube, I do have a little bit of experience with the Julian system. However, I used the Interstellar mod back then, which had the super awesome Uber engines, which made all of this a lot easier than this. So this is actually my first experience without using super overpowered things to get to the places I want to. And what you just have seen here is this weird funny thing is once you reach 1,140 kilometers over Jool, you suddenly get instant re-entry effects. It's kind of weird. I don't know if it is normal in the game or if it was a bug, but yeah, that's just the way it was. Now, because we have the station in orbit, the Laythe station, that has an omnidirectional antenna on it and a long distance antenna which is connected to Kerbal, we can now deploy the omnidirectional antennas that I'm going to put into a 450 kilometer orbit around Laythe, because our little lander on the tip here has only the omnidirectional antennas on that work in flight and don't break off, but the range is limited to 500 kilometers. So therefore I need the omnidirectional antennas in a 450 kilometer orbit. Yes, this is definitely one of the slideshow episodes. And while getting the craft down into a very low orbit, as you can see, I think it's 76 kilometers or something, we detach the little lander, which is going to spot ourselves a nice landing space for our for our base. Now, the main craft that was delivering here the Julian Satcoms, this here, was pretty useless, and it didn't have enough solar sails on it to work continuously and proper. So I decided, well, I have a station in orbit, and I'm just flying around the wrong direction. So I actually had to make a U-turn with this craft again, so we got an encounter with our station. And yeah, I thought, well, why leave something in space and just recycle it? And what you have just seen in the background was some kind of weird graphics glitch. I don't know, I never had it before. Somehow this episode's starting to add up with bugs and glitches and all the other things. I think recording this episode I had about 8, 9 crashes and bugs where something like it wouldn't load anymore, I couldn't switch anymore or something like that. But yeah. So because the Satcom mission didn't have any RCS on board, I used the station itself to pretty much suck it up. Now I would have a good name for the station. Let's just call it the vacuum or the space maid, to have it commemorate a good old movie called Spaceballs. So yeah, the omnidirectional satellites have only RCS on board, but it's quite powerful when the craft is so small. And yeah, off screen I put these guys, there are 6 of them, into a orbit. But let's move on to once again re-entry around Jool. As you guys can see here, I did this a couple of times until my orbit was pretty much on the same height as it was as Laythe is. Dear God, being sick, you can't even talk and think and law. But I did want to get the episode out before I leave for London, because I don't have my computer with me and I will be unable to do anything. So yeah, let's continue on. Less bragging, more storytelling. This here is then the point where I reached the pretty much a close orbit to Laythe, but I still had to make some changes, so we actually got an encounter. And most importantly, in a high orbit, what I had to do here it was accelerate, so I didn't go in for another aero braking around Jool. So yeah, now I'm just messing around with my maneuver nodes that I so love to set up and then had problems again. Or actually, no, I didn't have problems here because this didn't require any satellite connection because we have two wonderful Kerbals on board, which guys you can try to pronounce by looking at their names in the top bottom right corner of the screen. So yeah, we actually did get into a orbit around Laythe. We still have a little bit of a fuel reserve left. However, I felt like we are not going to accelerate too much anymore, and therefore I started transferring fuels back and forth so we could detach two of the fuel tanks and engines because we will not need them anymore, and we'll just have them re-enter the atmosphere and burn up eventually. So yeah, once we reach the orbit, we're also going to stabilize this craft here because we haven't found a suitable site yet for landing, and therefore we're just gonna park this here and wait until the proper time arrives. But enough of Laythe, let's return to Kerbal, where we plan our next great mission to Duna, the red planet. And I have designed two crafts for this. Well, you guys gonna see it. Not too many spoilers in advance and explaining everything. We'll just go and skip ahead where to the construction is actually complete. And while, ooh, look at that, we actually have a solar eclipse right there. That is something you don't see too often in the game, or you miss it easily because you're in map mode. But yeah, the first craft is finished, and it is a main stage drive, which is going to fly there and back. And I have a redesigned lander that probably has a little bit of a it looks a little bit more like the Moho and Draz lander, but is adapted to Duna. And this craft here, you guys already know from my little teaser a while back. But this is, of course, the refined and refurbished unit. Now, our Duna mission, of course, needs as well a new crew, so we have one of our good orange suits going up with a lot of other guys and gals. We have Lumen and Julian with us. I'm actually quite sad that I cannot upgrade to the newest version or 1.0 once the game is pretty much released to have female Kerbals in, so right now all I can do is pretend. Yeah, we have a successful docking. It seems like we have some good trained guys here, or I'm just a little bit capable. So yeah, all of this is set up. We still have some days until we can leave for Duna. We do have to send up some new resources, and once again, we're limping our way towards the colony logistics hub. Dear God, my mind is broken. Okay, let's wrap this up. We have everything ready for Laythe. We can go in for landing in Laythe. We just need to find a perfect spot. Something that I would look forward to would be somewhere around here on these islands that are on the equator. But yeah, we'll see all of that in the next episode, which will take a while. Thank you guys for tuning in, and until next time.